Welcome back to another text explication on Pirkei Avot with me, Rabbi Drew. We are now on the 16th text in the third chapter of Pirkei Avot, and this is another saying of Rabbi Akiva's. We've had a few statements previously from Rabbi Akiva, and this one kicks off in a familiar way with it saying, Hu haya omer, he used to say, meaning this was a common expression of Rabbi Akiva's. He actually launches into a really interesting sort of woven metaphor. He says, everything is given against a pledge, and a net is spread out over all the living. The store is open, and the storekeeper allows credit, but the ledger is open, and the hand writes. And whomever wishes to borrow may come and borrow, but the collectors go round regularly every day and exact dues from people, whether with their consent or without their consent, and they have on which they can rely. V'hadin din emet, and the judgment is a true judgment. V'hakol metukan lasuda, and everything's established, everything's ready, everything is prepared for the meal. That sort of comes out of nowhere. We'll get to that in a moment. So what he talks about is this entire really incredible metaphor. It kind of reminds me, maybe it reminds you as well, of what we saw towards the end of the second chapter of statements of Rabbi Tarfon talking about the day is short, there's so much work to do, all these different things. Interesting metaphor. Here, Rabbi Akiva engages in a metaphor where it seems to me, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, it seems to me Rabbi Akiva here is talking about doing basically mitzvot, spending Torah time, and I see that really based on the context of his other statements. Very Torah-oriented and mitzvot-oriented. So doing mitzvot can sort of help one with paying, let me take it back. The debts might be sins or transgressions, whereas the way to repay it back is through mitzvot. Another way it could be is if one does various transgressions, maybe what one has to pay could be, who knows, maybe some sort of pain or punishment, unclear, right? It's an interesting metaphor, and there's lots of ways to be able to understand it. Now, ultimately, what's fascinating for me is v'hadin din emet, right? Whatever happens in this accounting, it's going to be. It's not like these collectors are skimming from the top, or they're pocketing a little for themselves. It's all fair, right? And what this judgment is, it's all entirely fair. And then seemingly out of nowhere, the final three words, v'hakol metukan lasuda, everything's ready for the meal. It seems to come out of nowhere, right? It seems to be that there's a lot going on. There's debts being collected. It's all very tumultuous and very financially involved. And at the end, it's all about this meal, right? So it's really fascinating when we get this. It's almost like a twist to the story, or to the metaphor, as it were. Everything's so busy about getting one's ledgers settled, and at the end, there's a meal. There's a festive meal. So to some degree, I almost wonder how much this has to do with sort of life. We see in the fourth chapter, we haven't gone there yet, but when we get there, it'll be interesting. There's a text in the fourth chapter. Some texts attribute it to Rabbi Yaakov, but some to Rabbi Akiva, who talks about this world is ultimately just a corridor to the world to come, and there's going to be a banquet. So it's unclear. Certainly there's some parallels to these texts, but this is certainly a much more intricately metaphor with that meal at the end. So it could be about life, that we have a lot going on every day. There's a lot going on, this, that, the other way, but ultimately there's a festive meal at the end. There's enjoyment at the end of the road. So it's an interesting way of keeping things sort of in mind, framing life, that there's various debts, collection of debts, but ultimately at the end of the day, what's at the end is some sort of festive meal. All right. That'll do it for this text, and I look forward to the next one. All right. Thank you so much for watching.